Canada's been discriminating against our children on reserve. The Canadian Human Rights Tribunal found that non-Indigenous children living off reserve were receiving a level of service that was not the same on reserve. And so in 2016, the Canadian Human Rights Tribunal issued an order saying to Canada, it's time you stop discriminating through your funding formulas on reserve child protection. And so from that point, we have been negotiating with Canada to bring forward a resolution to discriminatory practices. I'm Abram, Benedict. I'm the Ontario Regional Chief. Let's put some context behind the settlement agreement itself. Ontario has been a major has been heavily involved in the negotiation of this final settlement agreement. We intervened in this case at the Canadian Human Rights Tribunal several years ago. Because Ontario is very diverse and unique, we have a lot of communities in the north, we felt it was very important that we be involved in the case directly. And so this final settlement agreement acknowledges those unique challenges, brings about resources to those communities to support their families. Because the Chiefs of Ontario has been sitting at the negotiating table since day one, we have been able to continue to keep our leadership updated as the negotiations have been progressing over the years. I believe that as a former community leader, as well as the Ontario Regional Chief, that our team has done a very good job in bringing this proposed settlement agreement forward to the chiefs in our region for consideration. This agreement is a $47.8 billion agreement over 10 years that provides resources directly to the community. Agreement that will end the discrimination against our people on reserve. It's important to also understand that there's mechanisms in there that acknowledge the uniqueness of Ontario, our region, and it's more specifically about the remote communities that we have in our region. And we have a number of remote communities that are impacted by the costs associated with program delivery in their communities. So one of the big components in this agreement is the prevention services, and those prevention resources is being provided to communities directly. And we have seen time and time again where agencies are not in the business of preventing; they're in the position of protecting children, and that's generally after something has happened that has threatened the child and the family. And so, by having community resources directly going to communities, this gives the ability for the community to determine what best services are available to protect their people. And that includes the employment of our own youth that have gone through the system, that may not want to go into the child welfare system, but maybe want to work for the community to ensure that other children do not go into the child welfare system. So that. And as well, the federal government has enacted legislation that acknowledges our jurisdiction over our children. And the new legislation that enables communities to develop community laws is another mechanism that will continue to support our communities having jurisdiction, or at the acknowledgement of their jurisdiction over protecting their children. This agreement will require the approval of the chiefs and not any of the organizations. If the communities do not want this agreement and feel that it is not right for them, then they will reject it, and as a negotiating team will receive a new mandate from the Chiefs in Assembly to determine what next steps will be. But the reality is that this negotiated settlement is under the current government. And as we move into this fall session of the current government, it is unknown whether or not this government will continue to remain in power. And so we want to ensure that we are advancing this final settlement prior to any threats of a federal election occurring. Because as we have seen in the past, when federal elections occur, any files that are in the works generally existing governments, and we want to ensure that we have this solidified before we go into another federal election.